Welcome back to day number 8 of Orchos Tzaddikim. We're on page 39, and now we have a special treat from Shlomo HaMelech, from King Solomon in Proverbs. Od Omar Shlomo HaMelech says further, Ga me'alulav yisnakir nar im zach ve'im yosher pala. Zeh pasuk nemar. What does King Solomon says? An amazing thing. That even in his actions may the youth be recognized whether his acts are pure and upright. So what is this pasuk referring to? Says Shlomo, says the author here. Zeh pasuk nemar al havchanas hanaorim, that we can evaluate the traits of the youngsters from when they're young. Ki min ureim nikaru midosayim. From when they were young, you're able to discern their traits. Kemoshe tira miktas hanaorim nireis behem midas busha. You're able to see that some of the younger children, they have the midah of busha, of shame. Some people have chutzpah. Some people have incontrollable urges. And other children from their young years, you're able to see their tendencies. Some have great traits, great midos. Vida ki kol midos ha'odam ashatira bo bimei b'habachrus v'hazikno hein hoyi bimei ha'yaldus v'hashacharus. He says the traits that you see in elders, you could have seen those exact same traits in them when they were children. Ach bizmanahu lo hoye bo koach laharosan v'lahavian l'de'amasa. But sadly, when they were young, they didn't understand, they didn't discern in these traits, and they weren't able to bring them to their perfection, to bring it to maximize the traits. V'ana orim asher grov alim hanavlus, and those young children who grew up with great traits, but then they left their home, they went to school, they went out into the world, and those positive traits got covered up by a bunch of nonsense. It's possible that a person can make believe that those traits, because they're willing to accept. It says, but sometimes it gets covered by all that dirt and by that nonsense of the world, and they get confused, and they don't even realize that they ever had such good traits. They don't realize that really they were a Baal Chesed, they were really, really kind to others, and they were giving, and they were committed to serving the community, or whatever, any good trait you can imagine, and suddenly it became self-serving, and all it is how can I make the next buck, and how can I make more money, and it all becomes about perhaps not using their positive traits anymore. And it is very, very hard to unravel and remove those negative piles of negative traits or negative influences that are now causing them tremendous pain. But now when you're older and you're a little bit more mature, you're able to see things with a different perspective perhaps, and you're able to clear away some of the blockades that were standing before a person making those corrections to their traits. Vehim domim letas kesef shahaya tamun bekarka vehela chaluda ova beorach hatmanaso tzarich oso hakesef mirika achar mirika. So imagine someone hid a silver tray buried underground, and it became very, very tarnished. Such silver requires polishing after polishing before it can regain its original luster. Ach, sheyoshuv hakesef l'mareo hanoi, until it's able, ad sheyoshuv hakesef l'mareo hanoi, until it's able to be restored to its original beauty. Kach ha'odom asher holach lefi darko u'minhago v'nishka b'imke hamidos hagruos, a person who had nice traits, and then sadly got trapped in the negative traits. Tzorach liltosh sichlo lahavdil bein hatov ubein hara. He needs to really work hard to identify the positive and the negative, and to separate between the two. Bein hatamei ubein hator, between the impure and the pure. Really, hisrag b'avodas Hashem, and to serve Hashem and to be accustomed to the way of Hashem. until he's able to restore those midos back into his consciousness and into his repertoire of traits that are available for him to use and perfect himself. So what Shlomo HaMelech is telling us here is that, number one, a very important thing, and I remember asking my grandfather this. I asked him he was talking about in his shmuzin, Rabbi Shlomo Wolbe, my grandfather would say about how important it is for a person to identify their traits. And I asked him innocently, how do I identify those traits? He says, one of the ways you can identify those traits is actually a secret here that the Orchos Tzaddikim is telling us from Shlomo HaMelech in Mishlei, which is, if you look at your childhood, look at the way you acted in your childhood. When did you act when you had dispute? How did you act when you had conflict? How did you act when you were angry? How did you act in all of the different circumstances that you can recall? You can see your traits with purity. You can see how they were. And it could be that the older person gets, it gets covered up with all of this nonsense of the world and customs and things that you've learned from culture or from whatever it is, influences. And now those good traits get covered up. A person has to really think back and investigate, what are those positive traits that I possessed as a child? Because they're really there, they're hidden though. And you're gonna have to work hard to brush that silver to make it sparkle from all of the mold and all of the dirt that got covered up for years, but to bring about the beautiful you that's within you. And Hashem should help us all that we should succeed to do so. And Bez Hashem, next week we'll continue to the 9th part of the introduction of the Orchos Tzaddikim.